so the last question I'm going to answer is, how do you get started selling your work? So I would advise, before you begin selling your work, to feel comfortable with your process enough and like your art feels authentic to you enough, and that you are getting like positive feedback from others and you're trusting in yourself. And I think when you get to that phase, you're going to know if it's premature. You're going to know if you're just practicing still, which you'll always be practicing, but you'll know the difference between I'm learning and I'm practicing and I'm getting used to this versus this is a body of work that I want to put out in the world and start selling. And so, I painted for, I'm going to say, about 15 years alongside working other jobs. And it wasn't until my youngest was born and I had taken a ton of courses and I painted for an entire year and got very consistent and really found my style, found my process. That second year after she was born is when I started selling my work and I started creating series and I became more of a business because I knew that it was time. It just felt like time. I had like 22 paintings pile up on, in my studio, and it was like, okay, it's time to start selling this work. I shared the journey on Instagram and I had people following me and cheering me on. Since the beginning, through the ugly paintings. I wrote about it on my blog. And so I think that the first step, like if you do want to become an artist, obviously that first step is to really learn your process and get comfortable with what you're doing. It does not have to be perfect. You're always going to improve year after year. But there'll become a time and you'll know, okay, now is the time to actually start selling this. You also want to be careful that your work doesn't necessarily look like someone else. If you're taking courses with different artists, just be careful that your work isn't mirroring them. There were artists that I took courses from early on, and I practiced their lessons like, exactly how they were doing them because I needed to learn how to use the materials. And I didn't know what to paint at first. So I would just paint exactly what they were painting in the lessons. And then over time, I learned to make it my own. It's not necessarily super easy to make it your own immediately, depending on the kind of work you're doing. I'm talking about like sort of illustrative work that I was doing, and I was making it almost exactly like the artist that I was studying under. So over time, I actually learned I love abstract painting and I love the intuitive painting process. And so I've gotten away from, painting certain motifs that looked very much like the artist I was studying under. And so that's kind of how I made it my own over time. It just didn't feel like authentic to me anymore to be kind of copying the work that she's doing. But that's how we learn. We learn from, we can learn from studying the masters or from studying from different artists. So I encourage you to learn that way. It's great, you get really comfortable with your materials that way. But I would discourage you from trying to sell your artwork until it feels like you. And again, I'm still trying to get to that phase where it really, really, really feels like me. So over time, it doesn't have to be 100% the kind of work that you want to sell, like your ultimate goal. It doesn't have to look like that yet, but it needs to feel like you. And even if it's you who's still evolving. And so the first step to even doing that is learning. Learn from a variety of teachers, learn from books, learn from YouTube, practice again and again, be consistent, even if it's just once a week. If it's a little bit each day, whatever it is, be consistent. Give yourself that time to really get comfortable with your process and let it all unfold. Allow yourself time to be inspired. Allow yourself time to take really good care of yourself, because, you know, as an artist, you are the person creating your work and you need to feel good. And so it's very important that you nourish yourself and that you input things that bring you life into you. That's an ever-evolving thing for me as well, but it's definitely important. And then, you know, just to find a platform where you can start sharing your process. For me, that was Instagram and my blog. I occasionally would share on Facebook, but, you know, pick the platform that feels best to you and just start sharing your process. And I know even for me, just calling myself an artist was a big deal. So, you know, try that on for size. Try calling yourself an artist. Because people are going to get behind what you're behind. So if you're putting that energy out of like, I kind of want to call myself an artist, but I don't know, so I'm going to call myself that, but then I'm going to pull back, you know, there's no need to do that. Like, it's okay to feel nervous. I was very nervous. When I first started blogging, I would put up a blog and then I would take it down the next day because it felt too vulnerable. But it is a vulnerable act. But I think the people that know you and love you are going to want to support you. And if they see you showing up and declaring something and being consistent and sharing your work, they're going to want to support you. And so that's the first step, is just to start sharing. And then over time, you know, it's just a step by step. You know, eventually maybe it's okay, I want to start a website or a little shop. And then there's so much more you can learn about that, like the actual you know, ins and outs of running an art business is something that I might cover in the future, because there's a lot to know. But if you're headed in that direction, or, you know, maybe you've already been painting for a while and you're just learning something new right now, but you're really wanting to get about, you know, selling your work, the first step is really just about putting yourself out there, and then, you know, finding a platform. I mean, that's as simple as it is. And then there's a lot more to it that you can learn. So I hope these questions were helpful. I'm just so glad to be able to share what I've learned with you. And I just thank you for being here.